Quindi siamo partiti da una contestualizzazione proprio per criticare la decontestualizzazione che invece i media e i nostri giornali hanno operato in questi giorni, per arrivare a introdurre il contesto storico che ha portato alla situazione attuale. E in particolare per poter descrivere quello che è successo in Palestina occorre definire il sionismo. Il sionismo è un movimento politico e un'ideologia volti alla creazione di uno Stato ebraico sviluppatosi a fine 1800 e questo movimento si poneva l'obiettivo di fondare appunto uno Stato in un'area geografica dove la popolazione ebraica sarebbe potuta emigrare. C'erano diverse ipotesi, non solo la Palestina, ma anche altri paesi come l'Argentina, il Kenya, gli Stati Uniti, il Canada, eccetera. L'opzione che prevalse ufficialmente nel 1905 fu la Palestina, all'epoca governata dall'Impero Ottomano. Tuttavia il sionismo non fu solamente non è solamente un movimento che è nato per la creazione di uno Stato, ma è anche un movimento che intrinsecamente si porta dietro l'idea di un insediamento di tipo coloniale. E nel modo in cui questo movimento e questa ideologia si è manifestata in Palestina, possiamo definirla un'ideologia razzista. E questo perché proprio nel momento in cui la popolazione emigrata ebraica si è trovata di fronte a questa popolazione indigena palestinese, si è attivata la logica dell'eliminazione. E questo sulla spinta di un desiderio che mette insieme le aspirazioni demografiche e geografiche di avere quanta Palestina possibile con il minor numero possibile di palestinesi. E a questo proposito si cita il piano dalle, quello che per Ilan Pappé ha consentito nel 1948 di portare a termine un master plan, e cito dal piano Dalet, questo documento di 75 pagine scritto dalla Ghana. Si possono effettuare queste operazioni nella maniera seguente: distruggendo i villaggi, dandogli fuoco, facendoli saltare in aria, minando le macerie, e specialmente quei centri popolati difficili da controllare con continuità, oppure attraverso operazioni di rastrellamento e controllo, con le seguenti linee guida: circondare i villaggi, fare retate all'interno, in caso di resistenza si devono eliminare le forze armate e la popolazione deve essere espulsa fuori dai confini dello Stato. E ancora dal diario di Ben Gurion: c'è bisogno ora di una reazione forte e brutale. Dobbiamo essere precisi nei tempi, nei luoghi e nei bersagli. Se accusiamo una famiglia, dobbiamo colpire tutti, senza pietà, comprese le donne e i bambini, altrimenti non sarà una reazione efficace. Durante l'operazione non c'è alcun bisogno di distinguere tra chi è colpevole e chi non lo è. E queste citazioni mostrano chiaramente come sia stata possibile la pulizia etnica. Una pulizia etnica che definiamo come la politica di un gruppo di persone che su basi religiose, etniche o nazionali decide di eliminare un altro gruppo da un certo territorio. E questo viene portato avanti attraverso violenza, operazioni militari, discriminazione, in osservanza dei diritti umani e delle leggi umanitarie internazionali. E a questo proposito, inserendo il sionismo come un'ideologia coloniale, si possono riconoscere proprio nella pratica che c'è davanti i tre movimenti che caratterizzano ogni progetto coloniale. In particolare in questo Israele è stata esemplare. Questi tre movimenti sono la distruzione, la cancellazione delle tracce dell'altro dell'altro e dell'altra, e infine la negazione di quello che è stato fatto. A questo proposito mi viene in mente che la stessa Università di Tel Aviv, che è fondata sulla casa del Mukhtar, che è palestinese, che si trovava proprio in quel luogo, narra invece di una storia totalmente inventata, come potete poi andare ad approfondire nel testo La polizia etnica della Palestina. Queste politiche di eliminazione, come ricorda il testo di Pappé, sono politiche che erano già presenti nell'immaginario, infatti si possono ritrovare all'interno dell'opera artistica, negli scritti degli intellettuali sionisti, e sono divenuti una strategia reale dagli anni 30, esitando nell'espulsione di metà delle persone palestinesi e nella distruzione di metà dei villaggi della Palestina nel 1948. Andando a vedere i dati dall'88 ad oggi, vediamo ancora che l'eliminazione della popolazione palestinese continua. Parliamo di 26.521 persone palestinesi uccise a fronte di 3.000 persone israeliane uccise. E qui iniziamo un viaggio nella storia che ha portato alla depopolazione e alla ripopolazione della Palestina. Nell'82 arrivano 5.000 immigrati ebrei, provenienti soprattutto dall'Europa dell'Est. Nel 91 viene fondata l'Associazione per la colonizzazione ebraica per aiutare i coloni sionisti in Palestina. Nel 96 viene pubblicato il libro fondante del sionismo, scritto da Herzl, e iniziano contemporaneamente le operazioni dell'Associazione per la colonizzazione ebraica in Palestina. Nel 1901 il Fondo Nazionale Ebraico acquista delle terre palestinesi e stabilisce però che queste terre potevano essere usate e lavorate solamente da persone ebree. Nel 1904 arrivano 40.000 immigrati sionisti. Nel 1909 a nord di Jaffa viene fondata Tel Aviv. Nel 1914 gli ebrei rappresentano il 6% della popolazione e inizia la Prima Guerra Mondiale. Nel 1917 c'è la dichiarazione di Balfour, nella quale lo Stato inglese si impegna a sostenere un focolare nazionale ebraico in Palestina. Le forze ottomane si arrendono a Gerusalemme. Nel 1918 la Palestina è occupata dagli alleati, termina la Prima Guerra Mondiale e termina con essa la dominazione ottomana in Palestina. Nel 1919 c'è il primo congresso nazionale palestinese a Gerusalemme e respinge la dichiarazione di Balfour, chiedendo l'indipendenza. Nel contempo la commissione sionista, alla conferenza di pace di Parigi, richiede una Palestina ebraica e dice che il maggior numero di arabi deve essere convinto ad emigrare. A questo proposito ricordo la posizione del movimento nazionale palestinese, che si basava su due principi: l'autodeterminazione dei popoli, quindi le persone palestinesi pensavano che questo diritto spettasse anche a loro, come tutte le altre popolazioni che erano sotto l'impero ottomano che si era arreso su quei territori. L'altro principio era la democrazia. Tuttavia, nonostante avessero portato questi principi e li avessero rivendicati di fronte a tutte le delegazioni internazionali, i palestinesi ricevettero la risposta che sì, il principio della democrazia e dell'autodeterminazione stava molto a cuore al mondo occidentale, però non si poteva applicare alla Palestina, perché l'impero britannico si era impegnato a fare della Palestina uno stato ebraico e gli ebrei erano una minoranza. Così la storia continua e altri 35.000 ebrei sionisti in Palestina. Ora siamo tra il 1919 e il 1933 e le persone ebree sono il 12%. e possiedono il 3% della terra. Nel 1920 nasce l'Haganah, l'organizzazione militare sionista clandestina, e il mandato della Palestina viene assegnato all'Inghilterra. Iniziano le prime proteste. Un censimento inglese nel 1922 descrive la popolazione in Palestina in questo modo: il 78% di religione musulmana, l'11% ebraica e il 9,6% cristiana. Arrivano altri 60 immigrati ebrei in Palestina, metà dalla Bologna, e la popolazione ebraica arriva al 16%. Ora è proprietaria del 4% della terra. Nel 1931 viene costituito il gruppo militare Irgun e il direttore inglese dello sviluppo in Palestina pubblica il primo rapporto sugli arabi senza terra come conseguenza della colonizzazione sionista. Tra il 32 e il 36 viene fondato Istiklal, che è il primo partito palestinese, che reclama il seguente slogan: nessuna tassa senza rappresentanza. Tra il 37 e il 38 viene redatto dalla commissione di Phil un documento che raccomanda la spartizione della Palestina con il 33% del paese che diventa uno stato ebraico. E questo comportava il trasferimento di parte della popolazione palestinese. Chiaramente la popolazione palestinese si infuria e di risposta il protettorato britannico scioglie tutte le organizzazioni politiche palestinesi e opera una rappresaglia militare. Seguono scontri per cui l'Irgun uccide 119 palestinesi. Nel 1939 il leader sionista Jablonski scrive: gli arabi devono lasciare spazio agli ebrei in Eretz Israele. Se è stato possibile trasferire i popoli baltici, è anche possibile spostare i palestinesi. E nello stesso anno la Camera dei Comuni inglese approva la Carta Bianca che stabilisce l'indipendenza condizionata della Palestina dopo 10 anni e l'immigrazione di 15.000 ebrei in Palestina ogni anno per i successivi 5 anni. Poi questa cosa viene estesa in realtà ad oltranza, cioè non si pone più un limite e chiaramente la Carta Bianca finisce nel dimenticatoio. Nel 1947, dopo la fine della Seconda Guerra Mondiale, l'Inghilterra dichiara all'ONU che si ritira dalla Palestina. Quindi l'ONU nomina un comitato per la Palestina che raccomanda la spartizione. E qui viene adottata la risoluzione 181 di spartizione della Palestina. Inizia l'espulsione degli arabi palestinesi nativi da parte degli ebrei di Israele. Questo prevedeva il piano di spartizione, quindi un 56,47% del territorio allo Stato ebraico e invece allo Stato arabo palestinese un 42%, con la zona di Gerusalemme considerata invece territorio internazionale. Nel 1948 i palestinesi iniziano a pensare ed operare una resistenza alla spartizione iniziano i primi scontri armati e l'Inghilterra pianifica di cedere porzioni di terra a qualsiasi gruppo abbia il predominio nella regione. Scoppia la guerra tra arabi ed ebrei e viene istituito il servizio militare da parte dell'Haganah. A questo punto il piano Dalet è portato a termine. Quindi il presidente Truman assicura tutto il suo sostegno alla causa sionista e i leader arabi decidono di accettare una tregua e un'amministrazione fiduciaria limitata piuttosto che la spartizione. Continuano le operazioni di pulizia etnica, in particolare viene espulsa la popolazione tra Haifa e Jaffa e successivamente grazie anche alle armi giunte dalla Cecoslovacchia, i villaggi lungo la strada tra Tel Aviv e Gerusalemme sono tutti occupati e le persone resi espulse. Arriviamo a un bilancio di circa 250.000 persone palestinesi espulse dalle loro case, anche grazie alle armi che arrivano da fuori. Truman riconosce immediatamente lo Stato di Israele e non appena Israele dichiara l'indipendenza, è molto curioso che questo riconoscimento arriva dopo solo 11 minuti, seguito da quello sovietico. Nel settembre del 1948 viene ucciso il mediatore ONU in Palestina da parte di terroristi ebrei a Gerusalemme e continuano le espulsioni della popolazione palestinese e l'ONU arriva ad adottare la risoluzione 194 sul diritto al ritorno dei profughi palestinesi. Chiaramente un diritto mai configuratosi in qualcosa di reale e che tuttora vede le persone palestinesi come questa signora in foto conservare le chiavi delle loro case ormai distrutte e dei loro villaggi ormai cancellati. Tutte le persone palestinesi attualmente in diaspora che hanno dovuto lasciare i loro territori avrebbero però diritto a ritornare. E a questo proposito mi piaceva condividere con voi questa vignetta di Naji Alali che descrive proprio il trauma di un bambino che deve lasciare la sua casa, la sua terra e che si rende conto che probabilmente non solo non potrà tornare, ma che sarà tutto cancellato e che qualcuno dirà anche che non è mai successo. E a questo proposito Naji Alali, che tra l'altro è stato ucciso in circostanze molto sospette mentre andava a lavoro in Inghilterra, scrive: Andala è nato a 10 anni e avrà sempre 10 anni. E a questa età che ho dovuto lasciare la mia patria. Quando Andala tornerà in Palestina avrà sempre 10 anni e solo allora comincerà a crescere. Le leggi della natura non si applicano a lui perché è un'anomalia, come lo è perdere la propria patria. Quando tornerò in Palestina, tutto tornerà ad essere normale. E a questo proposito è molto curioso andare a vedere come nonostante nello stesso 48 avvenisse in realtà venisse pubblicata la dichiarazione universale per i diritti umani, in Palestina veniva appunto portato a termine il progetto di pulizia etnica e la fondazione di Israele e in Sudafrica veniva emanata la legge sull'apartheid. Chiaramente la storia è molto lunga e sono alcune foto della mappa, però mi piace l'idea di dare proprio corpo alla complessità. Per cui arriviamo dopo anni di soprusi e di etnica a diversi conflitti armati. I conflitti armati che vedono i paesi arabi impegnati anche in una sorta di difesa anche legata ad interessi personali, diciamo statali dello Stato, per esempio dell'Egitto che si vede occupato la penisola del Sinai, della Siria che si vede occupata delle alture del Golan. Tuttavia tutte queste guerre non portano a nulla di fatto, anzi a un peggioramento della situazione, tant'è che appunto la Palestina viene praticamente ridotta un territorio totalmente frammentato e addirittura quelli che poi venivano considerati i primi accordi di pace, gli accordi di Oslo, in realtà portano a un ulteriore peggioramento della situazione, con un attacco diretto allo stesso Arafat, che viene successivamente dal 2001 assediato nella propria residenza e molto probabilmente avvelenato col polonio. Ci sono poi diverse posizioni, però l'autopsia svizzera dice questo, e diversi attacchi proprio ai rappresentanti politici palestinesi. E arriviamo a un non riconoscimento fatto dello Stato di Palestina, nonostante gli accordi di Oslo in realtà prevedano l'istituzione dello Stato di Palestina da parte della NATO principalmente. E questo sappiamo che rappresenta una delle principali fonti di non pressione poi su Israele nel rispetto del diritto delle persone palestinesi. Quindi arriviamo a una Palestina frammentata, a una Palestina dove abbiamo Gaza, che è una prigione a cielo aperto, che dal 2007 è sotto il controllo di Hamas e nella quale dal 2007 c'è un blocco che rende la vita insostenibile, come lo stesso ONU dichiara. Abbiamo una Cisgiordania che è praticamente frammentata in numerose aree, tra le quali ci sono gli insediamenti coloniali israeliani, e quindi vediamo i checkpoint, quindi la gente per andare a lavoro deve subire questo, e a volte appunto questi checkpoint chiudono improvvisamente e ci si trova lì per ore, magari dovendo andare in un ospedale. Così è il caso di Gerusalemme Est, che invece viene reclamata da Israele, e addirittura Israele è arrivata a spostare tutte le sue sedi istituzionali, e l'ambasciata americana stessa è arrivata a posizionarsi a Gerusalemme, e ci sono appunto tutte le rivendicazioni di Israele su Gerusalemme, e quindi diciamo tutte le persone, ci sono diritti diversi tra le persone palestinesi, posto che appunto le palestinesi sono considerate comunque cittadine di serie B, però chiaramente ci sono gli arabi del 48, che sono i palestinesi che sono rimasti dentro Israele, quindi nelle loro case, che hanno poi per il passaporto israeliano, le persone che vivono in Cisgiordania, e quelle che vivono in condizioni peggiori di tutte sono quelle a Gaza. E quindi mi lascia immaginare come che impatto possa avere una situazione di questo tipo sulla salute mentale, anche alla luce della violenza che le prigioni e la tortura israeliana riservano alle persone palestinesi sospettate di un qualche crimine. Mi piace citare il caso di Ahmed Manasra, di cui su YouTube potete andare a trovare gli interrogatori, un bambino di 13 anni che viene torturato, che oggi schizofrenico, rimane in carcere, viene anzi in isolamento, non viene liberato nonostante le richieste di Amnesty International, e probabilmente le accuse a lui rivolte gli sono state sorte con la tortura. E a proposito, proprio perché la dottoressa parlerà della salute mentale, cito Bourdieu, che parla della violenza simbolica per definire i rapporti che si stabiliscono in epoca coloniale fra coloni colonizzati, e in questo caso ci si riferisce al potere che i coloni hanno nell'imporre significati, rapporti di senso, e nel dissimulare rapporti di forza. E riferendosi a questa violenza simbolica, la si può definire come proprio il potere di agire sul mondo agendo sulla rappresentazione del mondo. E in particolare appunto qui Mahmoud Darwish ci mostra come i tentativi israeliani di cancellare la storia, il geologo preoccupato a analizzare la sua roccia per trovare che sono un viandante senza occhi, ci mostra chiaramente qual è l'operato di questa violenza simbolica e di tutto il revisionismo storico che Israele porta e fa nei confronti dei palestinesi. E l'altro spunto interessante è quello che collega la storia alla psicanalisi, e cito Desserteau che dice: i morti perseguitano i vivi, li mordono di un morso segreto e ripetuto, così la storia stessa è cannibale e la memoria diviene la scena chiusa su cui si contrappongono due operazioni opposte, l'oblio e la traccia amnesica, che è il ritorno di ciò che viene dimenticato, ovvero l'azione di questo passato ormai costretto a camuffare le sue fattezze. In termini più generali, ogni ordine autonomo si costituisce in virtù di ciò che elimina, producendo un residuo, condannato all'oblio. Ma ciò che viene escluso si insinua nuovamente all'interno di questo luogo puro, ne prende di nuovo il possesso, lo turba, rende illusoria la consapevolezza del presente di essere a casa propria, si nasconde nella dimora. E a questo proposito è molto interessante, si è collegata alla dottoressa Jabr, parlare della salute mentale in Palestina. Chiaramente alla luce delle violenze, della violazione del diritto internazionale che tutti noi conosciamo, vi presento appunto la dottoressa che è psichiatra, Dr. Samah Jabr, welcome. I present you. La dottoressa è una psichiatra, psicoterapeuta, direttrice dell'Unità di salute mentale del Ministero della Sanità palestinese. Nei suoi testi, di cui appunto ho citato Sumude, dietro ai fronti, affronta delle tematiche veramente interessanti come la differenza di genere, la discriminazione razziale e come la solidarietà con le persone oppresse possa essere terapeutica. Per cui do il benvenuto alla dottoressa. Ok, allora, hi.
Good evening, everybody.
You're welcome. I'm Alia. We spoke when I invited you from Chi si cura di te. I introduced you. We have Dr. Jabr, a psychiatrist responsible of mental health unit in Palestine, also a psychotherapist. And I presented a little bit your books, and we are glad to have you here. We did a brief historical point, because we think it's always important to historicize, to put it in a historical setting our interventions. And here we want to make a focus with you on mental health in Palestine. And we've prepared some questions for you. The first one is how to deal with a collective trauma when this trauma also continuously acts on an individual level in the life of mental health workers too, and how to heal the wounds of systemic violence in an individual setting. We wanted also to know if you have any particular practice to address this issue. And this is our first question.
So in your first question, first let me greet the audience. And I hope you hear me clearly, because I hear a little bit of an echo.
We hear very, very well.
Good. In your first question, I hear three questions. How to deal with individuals who are affected by the collective trauma, and how do we mental health professionals take care of ourselves? And maybe you didn't ask the third question clearly, but how do we deal with the collective trauma and its impact on the society? So be patient with me. I will try to respond to the three questions. first of all, we conceptualize human rights and justice as an integral part of biopsychosocial model. The social in the biopsychosocial model is usually perceived to be the individual social life, relationships, social status, economy, employment. In the case of a Palestinian, where there is a big impact for the geopolitics and oppression, we understand that justice and human rights are very essential, and they play a very important part in the social life and in the biopsychosocial model. So we stress it. And when we get individuals who are affected by the military violence, which is very prevalent, or by the trauma of humiliation, which is the most common trauma for a Palestinian, we acknowledge that the pursuit of justice is an important part of this therapy. And we do the individual therapy in a clinical setting. But that's the impact on an individual. Of course, I will not delve into how we do the individual clinical work. We do it in the ways, we use therapies, individual therapies that are culturally suitable to the Palestinian community. So if we're talking about a child, family therapy is very important. Narrative therapy is very relevant to individuals, where they can reprocess their individual trauma and talk about it and desensitize their reactions by talking about it and trying to put it in order in their minds and in their psyche. So we do this work while acknowledging that safety, peace, justice, human rights are very important for this person. The fact that we acknowledge it does not mean that we can guarantee it, because often when I work with individuals, for example, victims of torture, we know that highly likely that these people will be re-arrested in the future and re-traumatized. But we try to do whatever we can. The other question is about mental health professionals, the other part that I understand in your question. If you are treating in a Western context, if you are treating a child from the trauma of neglect and abuse, you do whatever is necessary for the child, but your responsibility as a mental health professional is to inform about the abuse or the neglect. So we Palestinian mental health professionals, we find it our responsibility not only to treat individuals, but also to be advocates and call for the implication of human rights, the application of human rights, and the ceasefire in the Palestinian context. This is why you find a person like me who is fully immersed in clinical work, but I would take the time and challenge the American Psychiatric Association when they write a statement supporting the Israeli attack on Palestinians. So advocacy is perceived as part of our obligation. And we are, on the one hand, professionals and also Palestinian citizens and who are affected by trauma. We ourselves are affected by hardship. When we go from one place to another, we spend a long time on checkpoints. We have family members who can be arrested, who can be killed by military violence. So we live this experience. We try to take care of ourselves, and we try to reflect and theorize on our reality. And at the same time, we perceive that advocacy and challenging the hegemony, the political hegemony and the hegemony of Western medicine and Western mental health as part of our responsibility. as Palestinian residents and also as mental health professionals. Now, trauma for an individual can change your nervous system for a while. It can create a damage to the brain tissue in a way or another, to the connection between brain cells. But a collective trauma can create damage to social cohesion, to the social fabric that connects us Palestinians. When the whole society is traumatized, and when we fail to stand up against this trauma and violence, it is likely that we will internalize the negative representations that are made for Palestinians. We internalize that violence when we cannot oppose it or resist it. And we will feel, it is possible that some of us will feel inferior, and we will feel that we are of a lesser nature. This is why we take in all that aggression and all that negative representation against us. That is the collective trauma in Palestine, which is usually left unnoticed, although it is very important. And we have not learned anything in Western mental health and psychiatry that helps us to correct this, the damage that is brought upon us, upon the social fabric of the Palestinians. I claim that there are several ways to correct this damage to the Palestinian society that happens because of the enduring and prolonged oppression. I claim that resistance liberates our minds and liberates and frees us from the damage that is being done. It frees us from the sense of inferiority, and it prevents that internalization of oppression within Palestinian individuals. It liberates us from having a negative regard for our society. And I have another claim. International solidarity validates the humanity of Palestinians and corrects the damage that is being done to us from the mainstream Western media that contributes relentlessly to dehumanizing Palestinians. International solidarity has the potential to correct this, and in that it has a healing effect for the collective trauma of the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Doctor. We saw also in those days the shameful the shameful adjective that Israelis addressed, with whom Israeli addressed the Palestinians like animals, very, very humiliating adjective, and we think that we think also that alliance and the fact that we stand with Palestinians is therapeutic itself, as you also wrote in your texts. And we have about the narration, the Israeli historical revisionism. We have another question that is about Palestinian identity construction. And the question is this: how does occupation, violence, and the attempt to cancel, to eliminate Palestinian history by mystification and historical revisionism affects Palestinian identity construction?
There are different possibilities for the damage on the Palestinian identity, different potentials. there is no doubt that the occupation has created multiple fragmentation and multiple attacks on the Palestinian identity. Identity is criminalized. Palestinian identity can be very easily criminalized. The symbols of Palestinian identity, like the Palestinian flag, is criminalized if you hold it in Jerusalem or in 48 areas. This is considered illegal. People might lose their jobs or go to jail for an act like that. The geographical fragmentation of creating Palestinians of Jerusalem, Palestinians of 48, Palestinians of the West Bank, Palestinians of Gaza, Palestinians of the diaspora. So this geographical fragmentation has created different challenges, different representations, and different facets of the Palestinian identity. Also, trauma plays an important role in shaping the Palestinian identity. I work a lot with minors who spent time, who were detained by Israelis at the age of 12, 11, 13. They spent time in Israeli jail, in Israeli prison. And they are often tortured, humiliated, traumatized. When they go out of prison, if it is difficult usually to reintegrate them in the society, to get them back to school, to their trauma and their experience interrupts their social development in a way that they cannot go back to their childhood and they cannot continue their adult life. And then they become very focused on that aspect of their identity as ex-prisoners. And it's very easy for these people to find themselves again in prison. So the overall hegemony and domination and oppression of Israelis damages the Palestinian identity. Palestinian identity can be criminalized, and the frequent trauma caused by violence can cause harm and hypertrophy of certain aspects of the Palestinian identity. I want to tell you, it's an example that I always bring. I show my ID card. It refers to me as a resident of Jerusalem. I come from Jerusalem, and my official Israeli papers refer to me as a resident with no nationality, a resident of Jerusalem. And so the concrete identity card deletes my national identity and refers to me as a person with no identity, and it makes my status in Jerusalem very vulnerable, very fragile, and this residency card can be revoked very easily if we don't abide by the unjust law and regulation in Jerusalem. So this is what I can say about identity.
I think you made a very clear example about what does it mean to be literally deleted by historical revisionism and by the attempt to colonize not only the territory but also our minds and our history. In this attempt to fragmentate Palestinian history, we can see another attempt of fragmentation that regards the Palestinian society. You spoke about the fragmentation of Palestine because you have Gaza, you have Jerusalem, but not all Jerusalem, but East Jerusalem, where you have also the colonies inside. So we saw also Sheikh Jarrah attempt to eliminate the population and the houses of Palestinians in that village. So we asked you, how does this fragmentation of the society, how does occupation and insecurity affects the integrity of Palestinian society and the cohesion of society in Palestine?
I think our tools to maintain the cohesion and the identity in the face of this violent and brutal attack on Palestinians is through a dialogue, a serious dialogue between Palestinians, a dialogue about the future of Palestine, a dialogue that attempts to connect us, to make us in a situation of participation in the project, in the struggle for liberation. And in times of crisis like the time in which we live now, what's happening in Gaza, it provokes and stimulates and catalyzes a dialogue between Palestinians. We spend so much time, all Palestinians, watching news, reading articles, exchanging videos and clips to better understand the situation. And this process of dialogue is very important in creating a sense of cohesion and in the retrieval of our fragmented and broken identity. One other important thing is our collective history, the retrieval of our collective history. This is a protracted situation in Palestine, protracted occupation that brought upon Palestinians, different generations of Palestinians, a lot of pain, but also a lot of hope. And when we revisit the Palestinian history and the Palestinian resistance to the British mandate and the history around the years of Nakba and the 67 war and the first intifada and the second intifada and the multiple attacks on Gaza, of course, there is a lot of pain, but we understand that the whole project of occupation of Palestine is a project of erasure, of deletion of the people of Palestine. It's a project where the new settlers attempt to replace the indigenous people of historical Palestine, the Palestinians. So, as part of all the traumas of the past, the Palestinians still exist. The Palestinians still feel their national identity very strongly. So all the cruelty of military occupation has not deleted or distracted our sense of identity completely. And this is something that we can be proud of. And this is something that maintains the hope for Palestinians. I don't deny the pain. I don't deny the disappointment. But there is also hope and a sense of pride for Palestinians. And I think this hope and pride give us the will to go ahead in our struggle for liberation. And we understand that liberation is not the end result of our journey in this life. It is the journey by itself. We live our lives knowing that we walk through the path of liberation and the struggle for liberation. I think there is, in Palestine, we lost so many people and many, many victims, but there are also heroes in Palestine, and keeping the images of heroes maintains our motivation to keep going in this difficult pathway.
Yeah, it's very sad, but it's also very, I think also sometimes sadness can be something that we doesn't make us freeze, but can also make us to make connections, because Palestinians are all affected by this sadness that occupation causes. But it's nice to see how Palestinian connection can make life rebirth after all this destruction and the death that we saw in Gaza. And on the other hand, I cited before when I made the presentation also Palestinian intellectuals and Palestinian poets like Mahmoud Darwish, like Najil Ali and Hamdallah, for the right to return in Palestine. And also the role of Palestinian culture and heroes is really important. And in the past intervention, you talked about the necessity of not having an Occidental point of view in mental health healing in Palestine. And I saw some interview you made about PTSD. So I wanted to ask you also about this concept and how, what do you think about this concept, and how can it be contextualized in a place like Palestine?
You know, the question of PTSD is only one example of why we challenge the hegemony of Western mental health in Palestine. But also Western, before I talk about PTSD, I would like to say that Western mental health tends to pathologize individuals' experiences. And in Palestine, most of the painful experiences are collective. And although they generate a lot of pain and social suffering, but we cannot pathologize them. The context is pathological. The context generates a lot of pain, and the context need to be treated, not the individual. So that's one thing. It's the individualization versus the collective experience. One other problem is that it is ahistorical. The Western psychiatry does not consider the history and the impact of the history on the minds of people. And usually it doesn't capitalize on the culture and the healing aspects of the Palestinian culture. As for PTSD, you know, many organizations, local organizations in Palestine, try to translate our pain in a language that Western mental health professionals would understand it. So there were many researches and studies about PTSD. But I believe that the diagnosis of PTSD best captures the experience of an American soldier who goes to the battlefield in Vietnam, in Iraq, and then when they go back to the safety of their home, they experience the nightmares and the intrusive thoughts and hypervigilance and avoidance. Palestinians live day by day in the battlefields, not as soldiers, as residents. It's the only home that they know for themselves. Trauma is enduring, prolonged, repetitive, collective, historical, transgenerational, and there is no post there is no safe place. Hypervigilance, which can be seen in the case of the American soldier in the safety of his home as unnecessary. In the case of Palestinians, it is necessary for survival. Avoidance is also necessary for us. So no doubt that there is trauma and it is very prevalent, but it doesn't result in a clinical description that is similar to the PTSD that we read about in textbooks. I see people who have PTSD symptoms after a car accident, but people who experience torture and whose grandparents were expelled from their villages and whose father was killed because he was an activist, those people have serious traumatic consequences that don't resemble, that don't look like PTSD at all.
Thank you. We have two questions from home. The first one is how do the occupation and the military violence affect the epidemiology of psychiatric disorders? So we are dealing with psychiatric disorders, and which ones are prevalent? And you want me to tell you the other question, or you will answer that?
Let me answer this one, and then I'll take the other one. So there are many prevalence studies that were published about Palestine. A recent one by the World Bank, by the World Bank, that concluded that 50% of people in the West Bank and 70% of people in Gaza suffer from depression, and another high percentage suffer from PTSD. Previous surveys also concluded that 80% of children in Gaza suffer from PTSD and other psychiatric disorders. I question the methodology of these studies. For example, the World Bank study distributed the WHO-5, the World Health Organization questionnaire 5 about the well-being questionnaire, and people scored high. But this questionnaire cannot make any conclusion about depression. It makes a conclusion about people about the well-being, and people who score high need further assessment. Also, if we go now to Gaza and distribute the WHO-5, who wouldn't score positive? So there is an ethical question about conducting surveys in a time of crisis that we need to raise. And also the methodology is not culturally sensitive, in my opinion, because the disappointment and frustration that results from the political situation can be expressed in symptoms that look like depression sometimes. We call it in Arabic al-wahn, the malaise and the fatigue and the disappointment and the disinvestment and the lack of motivation. That is a natural reaction to the feeling of abandonment by the international community, by the world who teaches us relentlessly about human values and human rights, and then watch silently. I'm talking about official regimes, governments. They watched silently mainstream media that was defending Israel's right to defend itself. Over 50 days, they were watching. So if you come and ask Palestinians and distribute the WHO-5, everyone would score really bad on the WHO-5. A more serious study was published in The Lancet by WHO 2019, before COVID and before the escalation of violence in the West Bank. And it concluded that 22.1% of the people in Palestine need mental health services. It didn't specify which disorders are most common. WHO usually, that conducted many surveys in conflict areas, concludes that the point prevalence would double in, like, the point prevalence of mental health disorders is usually doubled in conflict areas. And this includes everything: depression, anxiety, what we call common mental disorders, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and even psychosis and schizophrenia and bipolarity. So this is what we know about the prevalence. And then there is, I want to ask, because people really like numbers, and we have always to translate our suffering into numbers in order to be credible. I really question the validity of already mental health is invisible. It's not like wounds. It's not like physical wounds. But when we attempt to give numbers about it, we have to remember that not everything can be calculated, and not everything that we can calculate is relevant. Not everything that we can measure is relevant and important. What is very clear here is that this is a prolonged, enduring, protracted occupation that is violating the basic needs of the people in Palestine. The context in which we are living is very, very pathological. Let's treat the pathology in the context and then talk about individuals who are sick and need treatments.
Thank you for this suggestion. And we talked before about the double standard, the Occidental double standard, citing the fact that in 1948, the United States, it was published the International Human Rights Declaration, and in the same year apartheid was made in South Africa, and Palestine was occupied. So we are like very used. We have a very chronicle double standard. And the other question that came from people online is, I'd like to know how usual is it for Palestinians to actually reach mental health professionals and start therapy? Is there a big difference rate between Gaza, West Bank, 48 Palestinians, and how big is the stigma about that?
Okay. My job is the head of mental health services in Palestine. I come from Jerusalem. I work mainly in the West Bank, but I collaborate with colleagues in Gaza. We have one psychiatric hospital in the West Bank and one psychiatric hospital in Gaza. We have 14 community mental health services in the West Bank and 6 in Gaza. Our specialized mental health professionals are no more than 1% of the overall health staff in Palestine, and we spend no more than 1% of the total mental health budget, on mental health. So that's very small. So you can see how under-resourced and understaffed we are. in reaction to that, we've been very keen on training and building capacity of many people in the help professions to be part of task sharing and to provide mental health response. For example, I have been involved in the training of many doctors and nurses on the mental health gap program. This is a kit from WHO that is suitable for low and Middle East countries that are under-resourced in mental health. Also, I've been involved in building a mental health system in school setting. So like that, it's very easy to encounter people who have mental health conditions. If they are children, we encounter them in schools. If they are adults, they come to their general doctor. Usually, Palestinians experience mental health conditions with somatic symptoms. So in depression, anxiety, it's very common that people would go to their general doctor and ask for complain about chest tightness, rapid breathing, heartache, headaches, stomach aches. So if the doctor is well trained on the integration of mental health in primary health care, they can easily detect these people and provide help to them. As for stigma, I think we talk a lot about mental health in Palestine. I personally talk every day, every morning, almost. I have a show on radio. I speak, I conduct interviews. I write in the newspaper about mental health conditions. I connect the subject to any relevant circumstances that are taking place. We talk about the mental health of children, of school kids, of adults, of certain professional groups. Now I'm concerned about the mental health of doctors working in emergency rooms who can easy have vicarious trauma because they see very difficult conditions. And the mental health of journalists who work in the battlefield and see difficult images. The mental health of rescue staff, rescue teams in Gaza who get people from underneath the rubble. So we don't spare any opportunity. We are understaffed. We work on a very small budget, and we try to compensate for that by educating people a lot about mental health. And by this education, we bypass stigma, and stigma will not be a big obstacle in having people perceive care. I want to say one last example of people in the helping profession. In the Palestinian society, we see many people go, for example, a person with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, who have obsessive thoughts about their purity, if they do the washing before the prayer in the right way, if any sexual thoughts that disturb them, they would go and ask a religious figure before they come and ask the doctor. So in certain occasions, I trained religious figures on basic things that they need to detect as signs for mental health conditions. And this was very, very helpful. Unfortunately, we could not continue doing this, but I think certain topics like suicide, drug addiction, OCD, depression, it's very helpful to educate religious figures about it, because they are usually consulted by people.
I would like to remind you if there are
we're asking also if we have questions here. I can address you last question about 48 Palestine's mental health, which is healed in Israel and by Israelis. How does, if you study this question, and what are the limits? We saw, like in ethnopsychiatry, we saw we have many books that describe how it is impossible that a colonizer, for a colonizer to heal a colonized. So I have this question about 48 Palestinians with psychiatric disorder.
Well, I don't think Israelis believe that it is impossible for them to treat Palestinians, and treating Palestinians can be used as part of the of the laundry, of the occupation washing, of the washing of the occupation. So they offer the best health opportunities for Palestinians. Nevertheless, I encounter many people who don't trust the Israeli system and who prefer to come to the Palestinian system to be treated. I bridge the two systems somehow because I'm a resident of Jerusalem, familiar with the Israeli system. I don't work with the Israeli system at all. I work within the Palestinian system, but often I supervise professionals who work within the Israeli system, and they talk about these difficulties. So I want to give you a recent example from professionals that I worked with. Some of these professional psychologists who provide mental health support for children, Palestinian children, in schools within the Israeli system. One of them told me that a child was killed in the context of political violence. His classmates referred to him as a martyr, a shaheed. She, the educational psychologist, was silent. She could not react to that. The system expects her to hush the boys. But her identity and her national background understands where this comes from. So the Israeli system sometimes it silences these people. It makes people, it puts people in paralysis. It cripples them. They become ineffective because there is a double bind between the system that they work in and their understanding and empathy and compassion with the people that they work for. So there is this tension between the two. To say Allah yarhamu, or peace be upon his soul, for someone who dies in the political context is something that can be criminalized within the Israeli system. Every day I see someone who chooses to not be treated in the Israeli system. A Palestinian employee working in a medical setting, an angry Israeli guy gets in the profession in the professional place in his workplace and starts shouting at him, telling him, "You terrorists, what are you doing in our hospital? Go to Gaza," shouting at the Palestinian employees. And so the guy reacts verbally to that. The angry Israeli man sprays him with pepper. He loses consciousness and falls on the ground. No one comes to help him. They call the police, and the police takes the Palestinian employee for interrogation. And now the guy suffers from panic attack, and there is he cannot go back to his workplace. So it's very, very complex conditions. So yeah, I think there are the political reality stands, it pollutes the therapeutic relationship often in these encounters, and we need to be aware of it, and it's very important to make room and space to talk about it. And since the beginning of the attacks, since October the 7th, the level of repression went very, very high in Jerusalem and 48 areas, and people really fear their colleagues if they are working in the Israeli system, because in certain circumstances, it was the other employees in the Israeli institution that informed about certain Palestinians that they listen to pro-Palestinian media. There is a song or a photo of Abu Ubaidah on their phone. So anything that people are being held accountable for their opinion and for their feelings regarding what's happening in Gaza and for other Palestinians. It's a complex situation, and it doesn't permit usual therapeutic relation, I think.
We have last question, if it is okay for you, and it's from Elena Medi. She asked, "Thank you, Dr. Jabr, for your vibrant testimony. My question is, how can I control my rage and perceived impotency in the face of what has happened and is happening to Palestinian people? Of course, in the perspective of resisting to it and solidarizing with Palestinians."
This question everybody asks, everybody here in Palestine, they ask me this question. They talk about feelings of fear, guilt, and helplessness. And my answer to that is that we need to accept these feelings because they tell us something about ourselves, about our value system. They tell us something about the situation and how the situation is affecting us. And after accepting these feelings, we take the feeling as a direction. We feel bad because this feeling is giving us a direction about where we need to go. And I cannot decide what direction should everyone. I think it is a very personal question. Everyone should find the right direction for her or himself. But I want to say that one of the accurate definitions of trauma that I like a lot is that trauma is the disaster of helplessness. When we feel helpless, when we cannot do anything, when we are freezing, when we are paralyzed, it feels bad. And then we become traumatized. So it's important for people to move from that status of helplessness to becoming active, to decide what is your domain, what's your space, where can you contribute effectively. Choose the things that match your characteristics, your field of expertise, and try to do something helpful that takes you a few steps towards your end goal in the direction that is indicated by your heart feelings. One other thing that liberates us from the difficult feelings is to talk to others, to communicate, to be in a dialogue, to try to process these feelings with other people. It's important not to be isolated in our feelings, because I think repression, it generates many bad feelings, and when you're silent about them and you don't communicate them, these feelings make you sick. Eventually the repression will pathologize you, or you will explode. One day these feelings become explosive, and then you become dangerous. So it's very important to deal with the feelings day by day with others and understand them, pay attention to the feelings and see to which direction they are taking you, and how can you use the feelings as a fuel for action and making change.
So I thought it was the last, but we have other questions. And this is, I think, a question that we deal with, but I will add also something I thought while you were speaking. And the question is, do you have an idea of how many children and adults suffer from PTSD because of the ongoing occupation? This is the question. And my adding is, when you was talking about the inefficacy of numbers and research, I want to ask you, how can research in a decolonial perspective can aid the Palestinian cause, and something I dream is to have research to bring to international courts, like those are the effects of what you did. Sure, international law doesn't work in Palestine. It's blind, and we know the geopolitical situation. But I want just to ask if we can imagine a pathway of this in this sense.
I would question the question first, because I already objected to the applicability of PTSD in the Palestinian context. So if you want to go back to literature, I want to tell you that in different papers that were written about Palestine, PTSD, the prevalence of PTSD varied from 17 to 85%. And that shows you those different variant results show you the inappropriateness of the diagnosis. But I think that there are other traumatic reactions, including depression, anxiety, personality changes, and pain that does not fulfill any criteria, grief reaction that does not fulfill any criteria of a DSM or ICD diagnosis. And this is very prevalent. I believe that the latest events in Gaza didn't leave anyone untouched, not even inside Gaza, not only inside Gaza, also outside, those who watch from a distance in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, all Palestinians who watch this, and many outside Palestine who watch this, they don't leave people untouched. Now, people would have different reactions at different times. So the closeness, how we are close in time to the event would determine our reaction. And also it depends on our other resources. What do we do with these feelings? And I think that those who can be actors for change get affected less than others. So I wouldn't talk about statistics of PTSD because I really don't believe in the construct of PTSD. Sorry, the question was long. I don't know if I'm missing other sub questions in your question, so please feel free to remind me.
There was my question that it was about the importance of research. So I agree with you that numbers can be really unuseful in a tragedy like Palestinian tragedy. But I am asking, like, if that can also, with international community engagement, can be a way to put it on an international law table.
Yeah, I think it is important, but let us prioritize. Because given how few we are mental health professionals and how big is the demand for mental health services, I don't think that research is the most urgent thing. In my opinion now, when I'm looking at the crisis, last night I got a letter to the publisher of The Lancet, printed. It came out, you can find it online, in which I talk about how Palestinians try to meet the needs, the mental health needs in Gaza crisis. So I say that the most urgent thing is ceasefire and the establishment of a safe place and the restoration of basic needs of water, medicine, food, shelter. Then we can talk about mental health interventions. And these mental health interventions should be based on support groups, open spaces, safe spaces for people to express themselves. Many of the experiences are unspeakable. So symbols, a symbolic expression through play, through arts, through culture, through narratives are important. So collective interventions. And some people need to be handled in individual clinical setting, but the majority need support groups and collective interventions. And research comes the last thing on the list of priorities. Research will come later. We should not be quick to go and research. First, because when there is a humanitarian crisis, when people are suffering so much, and before we provide any intervention, what's the point of researching and coming up with data? But later on, after we do the ceasefire, establishment of safe place, collective interventions, and then later on, when the intensity of violence is gone, it fades away, we can study the aftermath of this crisis. To do this work, I think qualitative research is most appropriate for the Palestinian experience, to capture the nuances and the complexity of the situation. And this is my opportunity to tell you that we need help in doing that. We need help because we are overworked, because we are overwhelmed, because this is too much for us, because it's too painful. The details are too painful, and it's better to do that with partners. I work a lot with victims of torture, and I always find it easier to work with somebody. It's too overwhelming when I do it alone, or when I write the file, the documentation file alone. This work can be too painful for one person. So we need help in the in doing this work and documenting this work. And we do it not only as researchers, but I think it's I personally feel that this is our obligation to testify for this phase of Palestinian history. This is our testimony. You know, in Arabic language, there is a connection between the words martyr, shaheed, and those who bear witness, shahid. So it's on the same spectrum to sacrifice yourself completely for the well-being of others, that's the shaheed, and to bear witness for the unjust situation and to tell the truth, to speak truth to power, is about being a shahid. And I think research and documentation is also important because this is our testimony for a testimony about what's taking place in Palestine. And please, if any one of you, or if you know anyone who would like to bear witness and to join us in this heavy work, you're most welcome.
Sure, we would be very happy to collaborate, and I would like then to talk also about it, and we will. And I want also to ask you, because we promoted recently a telemedicine campaign. It was the idea was not our, but we shared this and promote this idea.
I lost you.
Oh, okay. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying about telemedicine. We promoted a campaign that was not ours, but we contributed to share it, about telemedicine in Palestine, and it was especially in Gaza in this last bombing. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think, and how do you think telemedicine can be helpful in a collaboration or in psychotherapy, also to respond to the question of the woman who asked how can we intervene, how can we act when we feel rage, when we feel bad for Palestinian situation. So can telemedicine be a way?
Yes, it can be helpful. It can be helpful not during bombardment, but later on. During the bombardment, electricity, internet was not available. It was difficult to reach colleagues in Gaza. I probably didn't mention to you, but I used to work in Gaza. I used to train colleagues there, and I know many people that I wanted to help at an individual level, but it was difficult to communicate with people there. But I think that later on it can be used in training staff, in capacity building, in supervision, also in providing individual sessions. It is more possible when people speak the language, Arabic language, and they are they are sensitive to the culture and to the predicaments of telemedicine also. Remember, our occupation is Israel, the country that occupies Palestinians. It exports spying software to the world. So that needs to be taken into consideration also when telemedicine is provided. People don't always feel safe to share everything on telemedicine.
Yeah, I think it can be a big trouble, this, because normally psychotherapy is confidential, but when you use online tools, it's not confidential anymore. It can be not confidential anymore. Is there any other question here? Okay, we have a question. I will.
Yeah, because of the first I want to see, you said that there are two things we can do against trauma if someone has a trauma, and one was the resistance. And I wanted to ask how we can resist, like a person can resist, especially in this situation that we have now in Palestine, and how one person can say, okay, I'm resisting in that way. And what did you meant with resistance in general?
So this question is about resistance, right?
Trauma can be overcome with resistance. And my question is, which way of resistance and how can one individual person resist against what's happening in Gaza?
Resistance is there is not one form of resistance. There are resistances, different, it's a wide and variant spectrums of ways of resistance. And I think the system of oppression wants people to lose their agency and to give up and surrender and be isolated and not connect with others. So anything against the intentions of the system of oppression is a form of resistance. And I think it is not appropriate for anyone to choose the way of resistance for another, because everyone is aware of his own subjectivity and capacity, and can decide what to do, what they are capable of doing. But we observe, even in our research, there was a research conducted in Gaza a long time ago about comparing children who participate in demonstrations and those who don't, people who participate in collective funeral of martyrs, who go and visit injured people in hospital and support them, and those who don't. And the data shows that those who are engaged and participate in acts of resistance showed less symptoms of trauma. So it is important to know this. And we see, I hear it every day from people who sometimes the resistance can take a form of speaking up, detecting a piece of misinformation that is used against Palestinians as part of the wicked propaganda that dehumanizes Palestinians. So when people research and find out that this photo that was used to support the misinformation and the accusation that Palestinians raped Israelis, it comes from Iraq, for example. This is a photo of a Kurdish girl, and it was detected in 2022, not now. So this kind of little contribution gives people a sense of relief, a sense of agency, and a capacity to make change. Those are the things that the occupation and the oppression means to damage for Palestinians, and not only for Palestinians, for pro-Palestinians in Western countries. Every day I hear from friends and colleagues and acquaintances in the West that people are threatened in their jobs, in their schools, if they speak up on behalf of Palestinians. So it is important to mobilize and strengthen each other and find your way to voice your feelings and your thoughts, even within the very small margins of freedom that are available. And I realize that there is a kind of Israelanization of Western democracies. Like in France, the punishment for supporting the Palestinian resistance in France is as bad as it is here in Israel. But people can find their way to speak up and speak truth to power. I don't know if this was an answer for your question or if I drifted completely. Sure.
So thank you very much. And I want to let you just a free part, not with questions. So if you want to share something with us also about what you wrote, about your books, that I advise everyone to read. And so I want just to our last minutes to be free for you to address us with something.
I want to thank you for taking interest in Palestine and what's taking place in Palestine, and taking an interest also in the practice of mental health in a way that is not at all the mainstream way. And I hope that you will carry this knowledge to a wider audience and you can amplify the Palestinian voice and call. You can use the books for that reason. You can share them with others. I continue writing from time to time about the situation in Palestine. Maybe I write much less than I should, given the overwhelming tasks that I have before me. So please make this work known and try to share it with others. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. I will see you later in other situation and other collaboration.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.